we got the hot news with Peter Gay. Yeah, Peter Gay. I know. We called it.
Yes,
We called
did.
it.
We did, and boy, is it hot, It's this one is hot, as we would say, like hot patties. So of course, BVI Airways was back in the news headlines today, and not because the airline is about to take off. Actually, for the opposite, the airline, it appears, has been grounded indefinitely and released news today that they have laid off their entire flight crew, that's pilots and flight attendants. Now, why has BVI Airways done this at this point in time? Remember that 2 weeks ago when we had that conversation about BVI Airways blaming the government for the delays in its launching its commercial flight operations. BVI Airways said that the government had outstanding obligations and matters that needed to be resolved. What exactly are those outstanding obligations and matters? We now have some answers according to BVI Airways. Let's start with money. The airline says that its pre-operating costs, which included the lengthy regulatory process, drained its cash reserves. And even though it's at a point where it can basically flip the switch, it says it now needs to raise more money to do so. So cash is a problem. The other issue why BVI Airways has had to lay off its flight crew, another controversial project here in the British Virgin Islands, that of the airport runway expansion. Yes, BVI Airways also has a problem with this project. The airline referred to the government's announcement of the preferred bidder to extend the runway back in December, that of China Communications Construction Company, as an ill-timed announcement. And why BVI Airways says this was ill-timed? Because it placed its negotiations with investors to raise more funds in jeopardy, so it was unable to get that cash. And added to this was the fact that the lure of this new big runway to big US planes would have threatened its investment. The other issue which has impacted BVI Airways' launch of its operations, airport improvements, which it says has not been completed by the government. Now, that includes improving the current security and immigration system or processes at the airport, which BVI Airways describes as antiquated and barely working. And this should have also included better training of personnel prior to BVI Airways launch. And so, Edgeworth, at the end of the day, why is it that BVI Airways has been grounded indefinitely? Three main reasons. According to BVI Airways, money, the plans to expand the runway at the TB Letsum International Airport, and the failure of the government to complete improvements at the airport. Remember too that the Premier did say recently that it has fulfilled all its contractual obligations to BVI Airways, and so all the airline needs to now do is fly.
Well, Peter Gay, I'm going to dismiss the other two and we'll just focus on the money, because all the other airlines are dealing with the situation as it is. Mm-hmm. You know, whatever is there now, you have Liat, Cape Air, Caribbean Air, VI Airlink. You got a bunch of airlines flying out of Terence Letsum International Airport that's dealing with whatever the situation is there. So I'm just going to not even deal with that. But we know that they needed money. And to me, if you come in to open up an airline, you ought to know what it's going to cost. You know, and when you come, you need to come with some cash in your pocket. Because it seemed to me like these guys came in here and are expecting the government to fund the whole thing, and they just run it and keep all the money. You know, so like, and so knowing that we need airlift for the growth of our economy, they're putting the pressure on us. They're putting the squeeze on us. You know, the big con game, the squeeze is on. Right? And so what we need to do, I said it once, I'm going to say it again, is we need to create a consortium of BVI landlords who got money to invest, and invest in the airline, because it has to get off the ground. Invest in the airline and get a share of the airline and be at the table of decision making, so that we could make sure that we have air access, and this airline and these people who come here broke don't decide when they want to turn off and go someplace else that we left hanging in the lurch, like how many airlines have done to us in the past. You know, so we need to start securing ourselves, because this is a national security issue. Our economic life depends on this stuff.
Yes.
You know, and so we need to be more vigilant. We need, when people come with their nice haircuts and fancy suits and PowerPoint presentations, we need to know where they're coming from. We need to do a little due diligence, and find out who these people are before we jump into bed with them. You know, it just is as simple as that. But so that's my view.
Edward Endicott, the Premier has spoken, well, once in a press statement, and the second time around during the midterm report, and he hasn't said much in terms of providing details about this thing. So we're now at a point where the territory needs to hear from the Premier itself. Are these points that BVI Airways has raised credible? And if not, what is it that your government has to say about them and its contractual negotiations, and what this airline has been requesting or demanding, and why is it that they continue to demand more money from the government, and how much more money are they demanding, and how far is the government willing to go before it says enough is enough? Remember too that the airline, the $7 million, the Premier says that it is supposed to be returned to the government once BVI Airways is profitable. Whether or not that's going to see the light of day is up in the air. Remember too that BVI Airways is also leasing at least one of those 2 jets that it has to an Haitian airline. So what is happening with that situation, and what is happening with the funds that are being garnered from that situation? So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered here. Remember too that there was also an addendum that was signed in 2016 to this contractual agreement. So what is contained in this addendum that the public needs to know that the government has tied itself down to with BVI Airways, and that BVI Airways is supposed to be delivering, that it isn't, or can't?
Yeah. Well, we have to wait and see, you know, I suppose, because it seems to me the more information we have as a general population, the more we could be on the government side.
True.
You know, and the more we on the government side, the more we could show resistance to this kind of behavior. Because when does it end? Every time they fall in a hole, we got to come out of our pockets, because we are actually coming out of our pockets. The taxpayers are coming out of their pockets. Every time BVI Airways get in trouble, we got to bail them out. You know, they owed us $100 and some $1,000. We bail, we allow that. We give them $7.2 million. They still can't get off the ground. So, you know, when is the bottomless pit of the money that they continue to demand going to end? You know, and so we need to start looking to see how we're going to fund our airline ourselves, and how we're going to run it, and make sure that we have airlift, and that we are independent of outside investors in terms of assets that are in our national security interests. That's what we need to start focusing on.
Well, the Premier stated in his recent midterm report that there is a reason why other governments in the region haven't gotten into the business, the airline business. So maybe that is an indication of where the Premier's headspace is at regarding,
and that's why I'm suggesting. That's why I'm suggesting a private partnership with a local private entity with BVI Airlines. Not that the government should get involved with, but the government should help to facilitate a local private partnership with BVI Airlines, so that we can have investments in it, shares in it, a say of the decision-making process, so that our national security interest is preserved. Thank you very much.
The reality is that the Premier needs to say something, and that something needs to have some details that allows the people of the British Virgin Islands to make an informed decision as it pertains to this agreement with BVI Airways and the taxpayers' money that has been spent.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's it for today's top news segment. Do remember to check out the stories, this and others, from the JTV Newsroom on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, JTV News, jtvlive.net.